Hi everyone, we're up on top of the mountain. We're reading some more of True Friends Are Heaven Sent. We left off to where we had a guest that couldn't hit a swan. He was trying to harvest a tundra swan. And Boswood, my friend, he had never retrieved one before, so that's where we left off. And the guest was really frustrated, but we talked him into staying. And so anyway, we're on chapter 22. And here we go. The swans were almost done with their mid-morning flight. It would soon be time to leave, even if Carl didn't shoot the last 5 shells. Not only did I want to see Carl get a swan, Scooby and I wanted to see what Big Bad Boz would do when the swan fell. And then there they were. 3 pure white mature swans flying right towards us. I was coaching Carl, telling him that I would let him know when it was time to stand up to shoot, when they were in range. I said, "Take 'em!" Carl swung slowly from behind. The bird then brought the barrel forward to that imaginary coal on the cigar. He fired, slapping the bird with a perfectly placed shot. The swan was coming down. Carl was whooping, hollering, slapping a high five with me before the mighty swan had even hit the ground. The huge, powerful wings of the magnificent mature swan were locked up. The bird was going to sail a ways away from us before he crashed down. The bird hit the ground about 200 yards from us. Scooby remained sitting beside me. Boz had seen the swan fall from the sky and was on his way to the bird. Boz was halfway to the bird when it hit the ground. Oh boy, we thought, this is going to be live outdoor entertainment, watching Boz with his first swan. The swan was wounded as it hit the ground. It flattened itself, ducked its head, and stretched its neck out, flattening itself on the ground, trying its best to hide. When Boz got to the bird, the big bird sprang to life, spreading his huge wings and driving itself forward, charging right at Boz with all of its might, its last attempt to survive. Well, Big Bad Boz, the soon-to-be legend of the marsh, made a record-fast U-turn away from the big, menacing bird, his eyes wide open, wide in fear and confusion, like a deer caught in the headlights. With his tail tucked between his legs, he headed back to us. The bird had scared Big Bad Boz. We all wanted to laugh at him and lay it on him that he was being a wimp. But just like Carl, Boz needed to overcome his apprehensions with the swan. I couldn't hold it in. I said, "Boz, you big wimp boy, all you did was brag yesterday of how wonderful of a hunter you were. That is all it took." Boz was on his way to try again. He approached the bird with almost the same outcome as before. The swan threw up its wings for the second time. Boz took off in the opposite direction of the swan, stopping about 100 feet away from it. Then he suddenly took off, and without losing one stride, he made a turn and cut like a wide receiver running a game-winning pattern in the Super Bowl. Boz was magnificent running, reminding me of a quarter horse running what he was bred for, the quarter mile. At a full run, Big Bad Boz charged right into the swan, bowling the swan right over, knocking it out cold. Boz picked up the huge swan and brought it straight to us, the look in his eyes as he approached us radiating the pride that he felt. Scooby and I were prouder than proud of Boz, too. We'd all had another satisfying day in the field. Carl and Boz both had huge wins, gaining confidence and experience. Not only had they both overcome the big, mighty tundra swan, but had made memories that would last our lifetimes of the days on the marsh. A day spent together in the magnificent great outdoors. I think that Scooby was the happiest of all to see her son Boswood overcome a fear and become such an outstanding retriever of the huge tundra swan. So me and Boz were talking, and we wanted to come back to Alaska. I was raised in Fairbanks, but I always wanted to come back. And so anyway, this is called Big Plans in the Making. After the swans leave, the waterfowl season has become short, with Mr. Winter just waiting to spread himself and cover all life under his blanket of white. We didn't have a lot to look forward to this coming winter. With all of our restorations done, our work for this season was nearing its end. We would all be out of a job until late September, when we would return to again prepare the marsh for another fall season. Boswood and I had become best buddies by this time. We were both wanting to broaden our horizons and have some adventures while we were both young enough and able to do so. Neither one of us had done much traveling. I had not yet turned 21 and was feeling that I needed to do some exploring with my two best friends, Scooby and Boswood. Boz and I were both thinking alike. We were both filled with the desire to go on an adventure. I wasn't so sure how Scooby would feel about an adventure, so I hadn't said much to her about it. She seemed to be perfectly content with how our lives were. I knew a guy who knew a guy who knew another guy who worked up in Alaska guiding fishermen on the ocean on some of Alaska's wilderness rivers, and hosted all 5 species of salmon as well as a huge Alaskan leopard, rainbow, dolly, varden, char, and grayling. If we could get a job guiding in Alaska, not only would the timing be perfect, allowing us to be back to guide waterfowl out on the marsh in September, but we'd have another job that would fill in the period that we were unemployed. We'd be able to get ahead of our bills and have a fun adventure, so I sent out a job application hoping that we would get lucky. A few weeks later, an outfitter called me and said that he had a position open for a floater. He said that it was not the most physically demanding job, but also the most dangerous. He said that if I accepted the position, I would first guide fishermen on the ocean, then later I'd be flown into a very desolate area at the headwaters of one of Alaska's premier fishing rivers. I would be responsible for not just guiding the fishermen, but also for setting up the camps and getting the boats and gear ready for the clients. Fishing on the ocean would be new to me. When we moved to the river, we'd be floating the fishermen down 100 miles of wild river while fishing until we reached the ocean. I was excited, but admittedly a bit scared. But what an adventure it would be. The position sounds like it would be right up our alley. There was only one problem. I hadn't talked to Scooby about it. If she and Boz didn't want to accept the job with me, then I wasn't going to go without at least one of my best friends. I told Boz about the whole thing. He was ready for the adventure. So I told Boz that I was going to spend some time schmoozing over his mom, Scooby. She could be very headstrong, being a girl and all. I really wanted to accept the job and needed to let the outfitter know as soon as possible. This is chapter 24, and I'm going to take Scooby, Boz's mom, to lunch. So and try to schmooze her over a little bit to let me and Boz go to Alaska. Lunch with Scooby. Wintertime out on the marsh is a time where it's a real struggle for any and every living thing to just stay warm and put food in their bellies in order to make it through the long, cold northern Utah winter. When we harvested the fields of corn in the fall, we would leave about 5 rows of it standing for winter feed for the lingering marsh creatures. When the snow starts, the corn that was left, along with scattered kernels that didn't make it into the trucks during harvest, makes for an added food source. For the geese, pheasants, chukars, Hungarian partridge, even the mule deer were dependent upon the tall corn stalks not getting covered up with snow. They depended upon the corn to provide them with the extra sustenance that they needed to survive the harsh winter. Sustaining the small game out on the marsh also provided meal opportunities for predators like red fox, coyotes, and skunks. Over the last few weeks, we had seen a group of late lingering Canadian geese landing in the deepening snow to get a meal in the corn. By this time of year, the geese were very educated. They would make 3 or 4 flaps of their wings to raise them up just enough to reach and pull down a cob of corn still on the stalk in its husk. It was amazing to watch them and wonder how they knew there was a big meal waiting for them under the husk. Anyway, I told Boz that he should make plans of his own for Saturday, that Scooby and I were going to go for a drive around the marsh and the cornfields and have a talk about a trip to Alaska, hopefully talking her into being okay with us on an Alaskan adventure. I packed a big lunch, then Scooby and I loaded up. We drove around, not seeing much life out on the frozen marsh, so we headed over to the cornfield to sit and have lunch while watching to see if there were any critters hanging around trying to scare up their lunch too. There were scattered Russian olive trees around the cornfield. The trees were chock full of pheasants hanging out towards the center of thick branch trees. The Russian olive trees are a very useful tree for birds. The tree branches have numerous big barbed thorns and edible small berries. The trees provided great cover protection from predators both below and above, and a tasty meal for the birds. The pheasants knew how to protect themselves from foxes, coyotes, and birds of prey. Scooby and I were sitting and watching the pheasants when a red fox appeared, approaching at a fast trot. We could tell that he was up to something that maybe he had done before. The fox trotted across the snow-covered cornfield to where the standing rows of corn were. We could see where the birds and deer had knocked cobs of corn off the stalks and onto the ground. The fox went straight to where there were 4 large ears of corn on a couple of the stalks. He snuggled down into the snow right beneath these stalks, almost completely hidden beneath the snow and in the shadows of the stalks. He laid there patiently and motionless, waiting for his chance to leap out and grab himself a meal. It was kind of funny how this cornfield had become the lunch spot for all of us this day. It was only a short time when 7 Canadian geese approached the field. They were hungry and voicing their approach with their loud voices, eager to join us for their lunch. The geese landed about 25 feet from where Mr. Fox lay hidden. The fox, confident that the 4 large ears of corn would attract these geese. The geese waddled to within 10 feet of the standing corn. Then one of the geese took a leap in the air to come down on the stalks, bringing them to the ground. At the exact time that goose hit the stalk, Mr. Fox leaped up from his camouflage position, his jaws open wide. The goose had no idea what was hidden beneath what he thought would be a gizzard full of corn kernels. In a flash, Mr. Fox had the goose down and broke the goose's neck. The fox picked up his bounty and headed back across the snow-covered fields to his den with several days of fresh meat. It was interesting to watch the pheasants that were safely in the tree. They waited in the safety of the tree until Mr. Fox was gone. Then, with just a few wing beats, they were all headed for the standing corn. They had obviously witnessed the sly fox setting up and performing his hunting skills before. Who knows? It's very possible that one or some of the pheasants had fallen to the fox's tactics before they wised up. It was time to talk to Scooby about going to Alaska. I gave her my best sales pitch, trying my best to make it sound as good as possible. A dream come true and a chance to explore a part of this big world. Scooby had no response to my big spiel. I left well enough alone, and we just sat there in the truck together until almost dark, watching the animals around us go about their afternoon and watching the clouds in the sky forming, thinking how the clouds fill up with moisture, the wind pushes them from one place to another was fascinating. Scooby decided that she needed to take a break away from us boys and go to my mom's for a couple of days. She needed a couple days of relaxation and chit-chat to work out both moms' feelings about both their sons venturing out into not only the vast outdoors, but for heaven's sake, Alaska was a wild place and was a long, long way from home. The next morning, Boz and I drove Scooby over to my mom's. We didn't stay long, just enough to say hello and raid the refrigerator, of course, for leftovers. The moms had things to discuss, so we got going while the going was good. And that is that chapter. It was a little longer video. I hope you all enjoyed it. We're trying to talk Scooby, Boz's mom, and my mom, too, whether we could go to Alaska and go on a great adventure. Anyway, we left off on chapter 25, and we'll read you all some more this week. I hope you love the story as much as I love reading it to you. And this book is on Amazon. It's the only place that carries this one, if you're interested. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep on reading, and we'll read the whole book. Still have about 65 chapters, so we got a long ways to go, and some really fun stories coming. Some wonderful adventures with my best friends, Boswood, Trooper, and Sand. You all have a blessed day. Coming to you from the top of the mountains here in southeast Alaska. All right, we'll see y'all. Okay, bye.